So basically, it's fair to say that there might not be a Diablo without the Justice League.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% believe that.
You will never defeat me.
Stay a while and listen.
Hey, Chris Baker here. And that handsome gaming industry legend you just saw there is David Brevik, best known to those in the video game industry as the creator of Diablo, and to me as my former boss. I had the pleasure of working with him in 2015 when I did PR at Gazillion, where he was the CEO. There we worked on Marvel Heroes, a very Diablo-esque game itself. But that wasn't the first superhero game he ever worked on, and as someone who runs a YouTube channel about that very gaming niche, I've always been particularly interested in his contributions to Justice League Task Force for the Sega Genesis. Thank you, David, for humoring my request for an interview about this game, and maybe a little bit about how it is very much responsible for a little franchise called Diablo being born. Skip to this time code if that's all you're here for. But before we get to either game, here's where it all began for him.
Originally, when I started in the industry, I started at this really small company called FM Waves that was making clip art originally, and then that business was not going so well. And so they had a bunch of artists, and they hired me as a programmer to make a video game. They got a contract to do an Atari Lynx game. And so I was working on that and met a couple of the artists and things like that. And then my paychecks there started bouncing. So I had to go. I had to leave. I had to get paid. So I went and worked at a company called Iguana Entertainment. And Iguana, I did a bunch of games, worked on Aero the Acro-Bat and Pirates of the Dark Water. And the company Iguana we started working on NBA Jam, and a little bit into that, they decided they were going to move the company to Texas. And I didn't want to move to Texas. I was living in the Bay Area in California, and I wanted to still live there. So I left and I started a development company with a couple of the artists I met at FM Waves. These two brothers, Max and Eric Schaefer, and myself started our own development company called Condor, and we were able to get contracts, including a contract for Justice League Task Force from Sunsoft because I had made Aero the Acro-Bat.
But making that DC game happen for Sunsoft? That was a bit of a process.
And they're like, oh, well, we've got an Aerosmith game that we're going to make, and we've got a, Justice League Task Force and some others. And I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, but those were the two that stuck out. And I was like, well, we want to do the Justice League game, and because we're big comic book fans and big superhero fans, and so that's what we would like to do the most. And they're like, well, how do you feel about the Aerosmith game? Well, we don't want to do the Aerosmith game.
Sunsoft continued to push the Aerosmith game on Condor, but eventually the team's love for comics won out.
We were pushing back over and over and over and going saying, no, we want to do Justice League. We really want to do Justice League. So when it came through, we were very excited.
And their connections through their time at Iguana led to another relationship. Curious why that Acclaim logo is there next to Sunsoft on the box?
Because the Sunsoft was going out of business.
Yeah, they needed those big Acclaim Mortal Kombat bucks to make it happen. So here we are, well into the 16-bit generation, and aside from some random Flash and Swamp Thing games, the only DC superheroes with their own games were Batman and Superman. Justice League Task Force would be the first game to bring any two DC heroes together, period, and it was also their first fighting game. But why was it called Justice League Task Force rather than, say, Justice League of America, JLA, just plain Justice League? At the time, there was a comic using the Task Force name that starred Martian Manhunter and minor DC heroes on special Task Force missions. Though Flash, Wonder Woman, and Green Arrow would appear from time to time, none of the Justice League heroes in the game were regulars in the book.
I think that was just the license that they could get. And as for why, I mean, Martian Manhunter's in the game, and as for whether or not, like, that had to be the connection, I don't know, but they never pushed back on the fact that we put all the ones that we did in with Superman and Batman and stuff. So I don't know why it was called Task Force. And when I would say Justice League, people would kind of like light up. Oh, like, I know what that is. And I'd say Task Force. And they're like, wait, what? You know, so I don't know why it was kind of subtitled that way, but that was the case.
I think I blew David's mind when I told him Martian Manhunter wasn't actually in the game.
I remember we made the sprites from him, so I don't know why. Oh no! As a matter of fact, I kind of remember this now. We had to pull him out at the last second. I don't remember why. It was like DC said, no, we can no longer have him. But we drew sprites from him and everything.
An Electronic Gaming Monthly preview article did include a sprite for Martian Manhunter, as well as obscure Justice Leaguer Fire, and even obscure-er supervillain Shrapnel, neither of whom he remembers at all. They may have been made for the Super NES version, but more on that soon. Despite only minor attachments to the actual Justice League Task Force, the game of that name would mark the gaming debuts of Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Green Arrow. Important stuff for a licensor like DC, and as someone who's worked on both sides of the licensor and licensee relationship, I know firsthand how awkward that relationship can be. Working on a DC game with Sunsoft as the middleman was no different.
We never really talked to DC, so we would get their feedback, DC's feedback, like secondhand through Sunsoft, through a producer there. And who knows whether or not that was really what DC was saying, or what, it was the Sunsoft, or, they were also could have been a lost in translation communication thing, like any kind of game of telephone where you've, three people down, the story is totally changed. So it was a kind of a strange relationship and strange way to do it. But we were excited about working on it for sure.
But just how much content was actually conceived by Condor rather than DC or Sunsoft?
A lot of it came from us. I mean, we worked with Sunsoft to kind of agree together on some of the story structure and things like that. But the actual design of like the moves and the graphics and, locations and things like that were largely up to us. And so a lot of the game we designed, though, again, Sunsoft had final say, and, or DC, they didn't guide us in any particular way. Oh, we can't do this or we can't do that.
And with that relationship comes feedback. Some more easy to make sense of than the rest.
We were done with making Superman. And we submitted the game for approval, the sprites for approval from DC. And they got back to us, and their comment was, Superman can't kick. And we're like, what? What is? He's like, no, Superman doesn't kick in the comics. We're like, what are you talking about? Superman kicks in the comics. And we would sent them a whole bunch of examples of Superman kicking people in the comics. And he's like, no, no longer he kicks or whatever. I don't know if this was a decree from up high or whatever, but he will no longer be kicking, which was really weird because this was, not only was it Superman can't kick, which is already really, really odd, but also, it's a fighting game where you either kick or punch, and that's the strategy, right? Are you doing a hit up or down, right? And so, having these kind of strategy of in the Street Fighter style game of having kind of low attacks or high attacks and things like that were separated by the kick and the punch and stuff like that. So it was like, well, what are we going to do now? I guess we got to have them punch down at your ankle or something. I don't know. No, that's what we ended up doing. We ended up making these weird moves because Superman couldn't kick. So
let's get back to that Super NES version. Why didn't Condor do it exactly? It all comes back to Aerosmith.
Because I think that they had promised the other developer the Justice League Task Force game before they offered it to us. And we wanted to do Justice League, and they wanted to do Justice League, and like neither of us knew each other even existed, kind of thing. And so like they were like, "You sure you don't want to do the Aerosmith game or whatever?" It's like we already kind of promised this other game to this other developer. So we we got the Genesis version. We thought that was the only version of the game. We didn't realize that there was a Super Nintendo version. We were never offered it. We never, so it was, whatever, that's fine. We doing the Genesis version is great. We weren't unhappy at all. We were super excited, but I think that that's why it got split up. I think that Sunsoft, this is all speculation, but I think that Sunsoft, had kind of promised the game to two different developers. And so like split who gets to work on which one.
So here's where Diablo comes in. You see, when David and the rest of Condor first learned of this other developer working on a Super NES version, they were still going by their original name.
And the other developer was this developer called Silicon and Synapse, and they were kind of an up-and-coming, trending, pretty popular developer. They had recently made like a game called Rock and Roll Racing, which had really kind of taken off and won some awards and stuff. People were really, really loving that game. And they had done, I think, Superman game, the Death of Superman or something like that.
And the summer 1994 event where this meeting took place was...
This was before E3 existed. We would go to the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, which, so the video games were kind of like next to the refrigerators and car stereos and things like that. We were just mixed in with all kind of public consumer electronics or whatever. So we went to the Consumer Electronics Show and we showed up at the Sunsoft booth, and we were going to show oftentimes we'd show the game off to the public at the CES, and people could play the game and things like that. And we were super excited. And we show up at the Sunsoft booth. We're like, wait, there's a Super Nintendo version of this game? What is even going on? We had never talked. We didn't know that there was another developer working on this other version. Like, we didn't share any of the same ideas for the moves or anything like that. Sunsoft had never said anything, and the games were kind of strangely similar, right? The like locations were kind of looked pretty similar. It was like we kind of semi-coordinated the game, and so we kind of like got to talking with these guys. It was oh my goodness, this is crazy. Like, they didn't know either. They had no idea that there was a Genesis version.
You might think that two developers working on essentially the same game could spur quite the rivalry. Kind of the opposite, actually.
We got to talking, and they were like, "Oh, we're big PC gaming fans, and oh, so are we. We love PC gaming. In fact, that's really what we want to make. We're doing console games and work for hire, and biding our time and getting some experience so that we can eventually, really make PC games, because that's what we're really into." He said, "Well, we're making our first PC game. Do you want to come take a look at it?" And I said, "Sure." So we went back, and they had rented this little office, this cubicle, on the CES floor, and again next to the car stereo, so it's like thumpa 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 thumpa, and we can barely hear. We're like in each other's faces shouting, "This looks really great!" And so we got to talking. They showed off their game, and I was like, "This game looks really great. We'd love to play it and give you some feedback or do any kind of bug testing or whatever you wanted to do." And they said, "Great, that would be awesome. Let's stay in contact." And anyway, that game turned out to be Warcraft 1. And right around the same time, they changed their name from Silicon and Synapse to Blizzard. And
Yeah, I'd say that's a better name for a game developer, thanks to being acquired by edutainment powerhouse Davidson and Associates. Blizzard was actually just barely able to squeeze their new name into the Death and Return of Superman, which I just so happen to have a fine video about elsewhere on this channel. But I guess this Warcraft thing was kind of a bigger deal, huh? Anyway, you were saying, David?
I think that they were like acquired like literally like the day before the show or something like that. It was like within weeks of this trade show, and so they even had a little, even though some of their stuff was still labeled as Silicon Synapse, they had also like they had just printed up a little poster, a Blizzard logo in their little private booth showing off the Warcraft game or whatever.
The two developers really hit it off and kept in touch. When Condor helped out with some beta testing in the fall of '94, the group now known as Blizzard Entertainment expressed interest in hearing Condor pitch a PC game in January. A certain devilish title brewing in David's brain since high school.
Diablo, enter if you dare.
We had a design document that we pitched to like 20 different publishers at the time. At these CES shows, we would get appointments with different publishers and we would present them, this little, it was like kind of like a book report out of high school, it's just like, there was like cellophane wrapped, here's my 4 pages of brief on my game idea. And we got rejected over and over and over again. Must have gotten rejected at least 20 times. But the Blizzard, after they finished Warcraft 1 in January, they came out and we pitched them Diablo and they loved it. They wanted to work with us right away.
Pretty cool that they were so willing to accept pitches that weren't their own, huh?
The Davidson Associates wanted to grow the entertainment thing, so they needed games, right? They were only making one title, so they said, well, how do we get more developers? Well, these guys made a Justice League game that looks a lot like ours, and it's pretty good, and so, and we love their game idea, so why don't we give it a chance?
But at the same time, Condor had other contracts to honor. They couldn't just focus on Diablo itself.
I was working on everything. I was working on 4 games at once. NFL Quarterback Club games on the Game Gear and Game Boy, and we had the Justice League Task Force, and we had these connections over at 3DO, and 3DO wanted us to make a football game for them on the M2, which is their 2nd generation hardware. I mean, I loved all the games I was working on. I really loved making Aero the Acro-Bat and Pirates of the Dark Water and things like that. So I enjoyed the process of making games almost regardless of what I was making. So the fact that I was getting paid to make video games was already a dream come true. So but the ultimate dream was to make my dream game that I had been thinking about and planning for many years at that point. I don't know. It was probably almost 10 years by the time it started to actually get made.
But that day did come. And along with some big decisions like switching from single player to multiplayer, going Windows 95 instead of DOS, and not using claymation.
No, that's not really that true. At that time, the Primal Rage was a new arcade machine that had claymation kind of thing. We had thought about for a second, for a quick second, thought about using that kind of style for Diablo, but like 3 days in, we're like, this sucks. So we failed on that idea.
David credits one particular change to affecting not only the game, but also his life as a game developer moving forward.
So, when we changed it from turn-based to real-time, that was like that. At that moment, that was a really profound moment, not only in my career, my life. I mean, I can remember it like it was yesterday, where we had kind of built up this thing. I was resisting changing it to from turn-based to real-time. We came to a vote. I was outvoted.
Condor managed to get some more money and dev time out of Blizzard. And then one day, it happened.
I worked over the weekend. Actually, I coded in one day. I changed it from turn-based to real-time. And I can remember like it was yesterday that there was this character with this mace and warrior, and he went over and I clicked on the skeleton and walked over there and then like busted apart, and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Oh, it was profound. It was Yeah, it was like I clicked and it felt so good. I could feel it like busting apart under my mouse. And I was like, oh, and it was, the rays of sunshine, the clouds parted, the angels sung right through the window. Oh, it was like this magical moment of, yes, it was almost something out of Monty Python or something, it was just really an amazing feeling. And so when people came in on Monday and were playing it, they was like, oh my God, this is so great. We knew then that it was something really different. It was something really special. And we knew that we had to make this change. I never looked back. I never mourned the fact that it was now real time instead of turn-based, and there were some design changes that we needed to make, but not that many. And I was just so happy with the way that it was playing that I didn't care. Really, when I knew that it was going to be a big hit was when a lot of the employees were working there. And then, come dinner time, some people would go home. Sometimes I would go home, but the artists, a lot of people would just like stay and play the game. They wouldn't, they worked on it all day. And then at night, they decided that they didn't want to go home. Instead, they wanted to play the game. I knew then that it was probably something a little special.
I'd call Diablo a lot of special myself. And of course, by the time of its release on New Year's Eve 1996, Condor would be known as Blizzard North. And David himself would move on to other cool projects like Diablo 2, Hellgate London, Dungeons & Dragons Online, Marvel Heroes of course, and for his one-man shop known as Greybeard Games, It Lurks Below. He's also president of Skystone Games, which has 5 games due out in 2021. And we owe it all to Justice League Task Force. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. If you'd like to see this interview in its completely unedited entirety, the unlisted link you see here is the only place to do so. Our little secret. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this interview, so please do leave a comment. I'll see you next time, whenever that is.